Hey everyone, I hope you're all having a fantastic day so far. Today I want to discuss a concept that I've made up known as a ghost economy. I don't think there is a term that has the same title, but essentially a ghost economy is an economy or country or whatever it may be that looks great in practice, okay, in practice or on paper, but doesn't necessarily have the feeling of being a more proactive or live economy, so to speak. And so, as per usual, I've got my notes here just to really help me. And essentially, the reason why I'm saying this is because globally, at least in the West anyway, there is this feeling that there are these bold West countries, make up the G7 and all this kind of stuff there that should be doing amazing and that are running the show. And don't get me wrong, they're still doing some really good stuff. But inherently, the people don't necessarily feel that it's a live and booming economy. Okay. Of course, economy is not just subject to the productivity and the money that's being made. It's also the general well-being of the people as well. And I'm not talking about classical economics. I'm just saying in general as a society. That's essentially the feeling. And so I've got here that a ghost economy is one that looks active on paper but feels hollow in practice. And there is a system where jobs exist but wages lag. We all know too much about that. And productivity is stagnant and real opportunity feels elusive. So really, and this is why I've said this in my videos before, like you can still have productivity, you can still have growth, but it doesn't feel like growth, especially if it's concentrated in a certain market or a certain group of individuals or whatever it may be. And so people are naturally going to feel overworked, undersupported, they're going to feel poorer. These things will naturally happen on average, okay? And so let's look at some stuff. So I've said before, obviously, that the OBR, or is it the OECD? I think it's the OBR. They had done a forecast of 2% previously before in terms of our growth, and now it's been halved by 1%, which is showing that actually, even if there was productivity, it's looking to be quite low anyway because of various different factors. I feel like I'm going to sneeze. I'm hoping I don't. The other thing to highlight is that since 2008, and I think this is based on the OECD, there has essentially been a flatlining of the UK economy. So if you look at the FTSE 100, if you've got something like Trading 212, or you're using something like some other sort of trading platforms, then you'll see if you type in FTSE 100, FTSE 100, or even on Google, you'll see that there's barely any growth. And that's because no one is really investing in this country and assets and the businesses and the organizations that are making this country thrive, so to speak. And so there hasn't really been an investment in different types of, I guess, industries and roles and opportunities, etc., etc. And therefore it feels quite, I don't know, just a bit tacky, if you want to say that. I mean, there are obviously many different cities in the UK. But of course, when people think of cities, they think of London when it comes to the UK. But London isn't the only city within the UK. There are many, many others. And of course, next people may think of places like Birmingham, Manchester, etc., etc. But there are other cities as well. And so, relatively speaking, the way of life relative to London is different in many other places. So there's a bit of a discriminatory and or cocoon effect that's being exasperated based on media and representation and everything else. The other thing I want to say is that there is basically more work and less stability. And some people may be like, more work? Are you crazy? Hear me out. What I mean by this is there is more opportunity to make money, okay? But there isn't much stable work. And so when we think about this is broken down into low paid work, insecure forms of employment, or unemployed. Now, when I say low paid, I'm talking about either potentially junior roles or first entry roles or roles that don't require you to, get any formal education or even vocational studies. It's just a body and, someone can do X, Y, and Z. That's the first thing. When it comes to insecure roles, I think that could be defined in many different ways. 0 hour contracts, contracting, consulting, freelance work, they're all kind of within that banner because there isn't like a consistent sort of approach in terms of expectations and culture and all that kind of stuff there. It's not necessarily PAYE. These individuals may be taxed via their limited company, corporation tax, get paid via dividends, personal tax, obviously have to get different insurances and all this kind of stuff there. And you just never know what could happen. So it's based on sort of opportunity and trends. And so people may be doing more and more and more based on the fact that there is this level of insecurity. Of course, is that the same as a portfolio career or not? Not entirely, no. It could definitely leans into it, 100%. It's not exactly the same. So this is more people feel like they can't find roles, okay, or jobs, and they feel like this is the only alternative as opposed to engineering their sort of like space. Of course, I recognize fully that engineering or creating your path in these certain conditions is difficult unless you have a market that aligns with your skill set or a skill set that you're learning to develop in and or experience, etc., etc. And then there's the underemployed or unemployed, okay? And so I say this all to say that we are working hard to put money in our banks and put food on our table and keep our families warm, but we're lacking stability. And then we're hearing the chancellor saying that, oh, don't worry, there'll be opportunities in security and Great British Energy and all this stuff. Cool. I don't think that's enough, my dear. I don't think that's enough. So thinking about all of this stuff, like, we're forced to think about things differently. And some people may see this as an opportunity. Others will see it as, this is no way an opportunity, actually. This is making my life a living hell. And I don't want to say it depends on how you see it, because I don't think that's fair. You could still see it a certain way, but not have the skill set and or the market. So it's really dependent on the individual. But if we're looking at the UK as a whole, then we're seeing that actually, unemployment rate, well, is it unemployment rates? I think it's more, there's been a decline in sort of like payroll jobs. And that's kind of like the indicator, but it hasn't spiked unemployment yet. And I say yet not because I think it will necessarily, even though there is a likelihood. I say yet because it just hasn't spiked it. Okay, so this is payroll jobs. This is the standard individual who's working 9 to 5, 9 to 6, 8 to 5, whatever it may be, who is on payroll. That's been in a decline, but it hasn't hit all-time highs yet. The other thing I was going to say is that real wages and living standards are kind of like stuck in what are deemed as the shadows. And so if you look at the rate of inflation over the years, obviously during the pandemic, it was like up to like 11% or so, which is crazy. Governments around the world, or at least central banks around the world, try to put it down to like 2%. You'll see that actually, even though there's been increases in wages and all that kind of stuff there, it doesn't really match what people have felt in terms of how inflation has made it more difficult to afford and spend on things. It doesn't keep up. Like, we always come back to this example where, I don't know if it was 30 years ago or so, but house prices were 4 times the amount of the standard salary. I think it's 4 times the amount. You can quote me on that. You can check that yourself. And sometimes now you're seeing at least 8 to 10 times now, if not more in some cases. Of course, you have to be sensible in your decision making, and you're not going for some big ass property. And of course, the bank will determine whether you can afford certain things. But the point being made is that it's difficult. It's difficult to get a property. And when I say 10 times more, of course, we can think about doubling up with partners and or family and or friends, whatever it may be. But if you earn 50K, getting a standard property, at least in London, as an example, would be at least 450K, 500K. Outside of that, knock off 100K or 150K, maybe even 200K, depending how far north you are. So you have to kind of double up with someone else or have high income in terms of your job, if you have a job. So yes, these are all things to bear in mind. Rachel Reeves says that will be £500 better off. Again, we should quote that and see if that actually becomes a reality. Okay. The next thing is growth without visibility. So again, the government has recently said that, you know, things like defense and the energy sector and different planning reforms in terms of, you know, making sure there's 305,000 homes within the UK, will create more jobs. They will. The challenge, though, is the diversity of roles in order to make this country have a higher state of well-being. It's not being factored in. It's not being factored in. Jobs will be created. Jobs are created every single day. But for me, it's the rate. It's the rate at which jobs are created and people can stay within those roles. We're considering things like what are the priorities for the country? We're considering things like how do we ensure that people stay in roles? We're considering factors like education and learning and development, and also things centered around just culture in general. Just culture. How do we incorporate a culture that embodies supporting individuals into employment in the right way? And they will say, oh, but we've done this whole benefits. But I think it's more than that. It's a bit more than that. But also making sure that we're thriving, you know, and there are opportunities. So, you know, since the pandemic, there's been situations where commercially some organizations have never gone back again, whether it comes down to office space or how they operate or the expenses that were incurred on them. It's difficult. It's very difficult at the moment. So next thing I want to highlight is it's detached from this sense of tangibility. Okay. What do I mean by this? And I've said this so many times. I've said this for years, maybe not even publicly, but I've said it for years. We are a country that is heavily focused on services, is heavily focused on intellectual property. And there is not enough source or substance or value that we can provide inherently. The inherent value all lies within our minds. This is not some hocus pocus thing. What I mean by this is services is why we are able to function as a country. It is services. We don't really manufacture many things. Of course we do. But are we global leaders? I don't know. Maybe you can educate me. Let me know. We don't necessarily produce certain types of products or whatever it may be. The things that are homegrown are things like our education, our academia, our finance sector. What else is there? Our legal sector, management consulting. Of course, that's shared across other G7 countries as well. And so that poses a problem, because what happens if the people within that country have low morale or are sick or whatever it may be? Of course, things can happen to factories and manufacturers and all that kind of stuff there, but we don't have that diverse range of resilience when it comes to our products and services. And so therefore, is it like, do we really have something to latch onto? We don't. We don't. Unfortunately, we don't. So this is why, you know, there are so many different types of people trying to be creative or entrepreneurial or trying to do X, Y, and Z, because, you know, there are ideas to implement some amazing things within our society, you know. So that is something to bear in mind. That will, I can't say will always be a thing, but unless we start thinking about, you know, manufacturing things a certain way, and I still think it will go down the intellectual property services route, then it's going to be difficult. And of course, Peter Kyle, who is the Secretary of State for DSIT, Department of Science, I think Innovation and Technology, this is where the whole AI thing comes into play and technology bit comes into play, where he wants to really push that sort of space. So we'll see. We'll see. We're not a big country. We're not. We kind of like flustered and boosted our chest and, you know, had this imperial era where we leveraged other countries. Can you imagine I'm using this language? But we don't really have that no more, you know, for many good reason, for many countries around the world. So at the end of the day, now it's like we have to really fend for ourselves. And for those people who voted for Brexit, you know, the ideas that they had in mind, it'd be interesting to see if those ideas are in fruition now. So bearing all of this stuff in mind, where do we come into all of this? Where do we sort of like conclude? Well, we could say that we definitely have a room and space for the intellectual property and services bit, and we could say that actually no, we need to really focus on that as a strength. Okay, when it comes to our finances, and really leaning into the fintech space, when it comes to management consulting, and understanding that actually it won't be a conglomerate sort of approach anymore. It will be not bipartisan, but it will be broken up into different things now. There'll be micro consultants, so to speak. So they've already started that with changing the procurement rules of 2023, I believe. Okay, so opening up to people like you and I who are interested in becoming consultants. There's also the legal aspects. Okay, of course there are definitely big technological advancements that could happen. So it's either we lead those spaces or we ensure there's the right level of accounts on quality when it comes to legalese in general. When thinking about the academic side, again, people still prefer to come to the UK when it comes to academics. Of course, that's split between the UK and the US, but I think Oxford is still ranked number one university in the world, and Cambridge is fifth. So we're still in the top five, which is pretty good. Which is pretty good. So we can outsource that stuff and use innovations from academia into some of the developments moving forward. So there's that stuff. There is still a sense of British culture, okay, whatever that looks like. And I would say that people do want to succeed, people do want to do better, but there is this weird cloud over our heads. I don't know if it requires loads of people to sort of like encourage each other to develop ourselves, but if a system is structured in a way where it makes it difficult for that, I can't blame some people, you know. The other thing is to say that there is obviously all of these reforms happening. So if what Rachel Reeves is saying comes true, then we're going to be less likely a ghost economy. And when I'm talking about coming true, I'm talking about the reforms in relation to the houses that need to be built and all of that capital investment that's going towards it. And the last thing is, I think that was mentioned on Wednesday, was in relation to the developments within defense. So a huge amount of money is being thrown into defense. I think 2.2 billion next year, and then 2.5% by 2027, with the aim to potentially move it to 3%. That's going to create jobs. I wonder what that whole agenda is for anyway. Of course, because the world's changing and all that stuff, but it's been changing for a while, to be fair. And I'd be interested to see what other countries are doing outside of Europe in terms of their defense spend as well. So, what's my conclusion? Is the UK a ghost economy? Yes, it is. It is definitely a ghost economy in a sense that it looks great on paper. And when I say on paper, I mean optics wise, brand wise to a degree. You know, unless someone's come here and they've seen it for themselves. And the reason I say this is because people feel sort of like unstable when it comes to labor. They feel like economically invisible. There is this lack of security and difficult to progress. So a lot of people may still be at home or find it difficult to find a property or buy a property. There is a struggle when it comes to productivity in general. And there are some towns and cities that just feel abandoned and empty. There is this negative strain, you know. A lot of the videos that have done well on my channel as of late have all been related to this UK outlook, you know. And I talk about this stuff because it's stuff that I talk about with my friends consistently. I talk about it with my friends, you know, these questions around, you know, should I stay in the UK? Should I go in the UK? Even if you leave, what does that look like? How can I make the same money when it comes to, you know, the same sort of, what am I even saying? How can one make the same money as they do in the UK when they move to other countries? Is that possible? And of course, the answer is yes. I've seen these marketplaces. I haven't necessarily applied to those marketplaces because I know that I need to make some decisions for myself. But the point being made is the discussion around the outlook, the economic or socio-economic outlook, I think that's a more apt term, is one that is being discussed every single day by multiple people. And I don't think it's just the UK. The US are feeling it as well, okay, especially because there's been changes within their government. Europe in general are feeling it. There's definitely slow growth within those spaces. and there's a lot happening in terms of potential war and everything else. But I wonder whether those in the BRICS nations, so that's Brazil, Russia are probably to a degree, India, China, and South Africa, and of course those that represent emerging markets, are having similar discussions or different ones. And I bet they're probably different, but I wouldn't say they're all under one sort of like brush. They're probably all feeling different things. But I would say that even though I say yes, the UK is a ghost economy, it isn't completely. And the reason why I say that is because there's still potential. That's the challenge. When we haven't gone so far down the road where it's like there's no hope at all. I don't think we're there yet. Okay. I know there was talk about all these millionaires leaving last year. Probably need to find out where that information came from specifically and how that was measured, because that may be exacerbating the effect of why we're feeling the way we're feeling. Of course, we're feeling the way we're feeling because the system is messed up anyway. However, I think certain like facts and figures kind of exacerbate it a bit more. But we still have capabilities and opportunities, especially within the services space. I would argue also within trades as well. That's one thing that won't go away. There's not something that bots will just replace quite easily like that. Trades should be booming, I would say. And there are probably opportunities elsewhere as well. I would encourage us to like think about things in terms of opportunities as a country outside of just the AI and tech. That's what makes it feel more like a ghost economy. There's opportunity, yes, for the individual, for communities, for ambitious people, X, Y, and Z, and will be some of that part of that as well, of course. But I feel like there are other gaps that we need to start talking about a bit more on where we can capitalize on those things. I'd love to see other YouTubers talk about this stuff in a bit more detail when it comes to a certain niche expertise. So if you're one of those people, start your channel and start talking about it, man. It'd be interesting to see. So let me know your thoughts. Do you think the UK is a ghost economy? Is this an over-exaggeration, or do you believe that there is something else that we need to consider? Leave your comments below, and as always, if you want to see more videos centered around portfolio careers, soft economics, leadership, all of that kind of stuff, then don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, my friends, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.